On January 28, 1986, the Space Shuttle Challenger was headed into space for a mission and exploded 73 seconds into flight due to mechanical failures caused by cold weather, an issue that engineers had forewarned about prior to takeoff. And instead of the State of the Union address scheduled for that day, President Ronald Reagan spoke of the disaster and said, "I've always had great faith in and respect for our space program, and what happens today does nothing to just diminish it." Reagan tried to comfort a grieving nation and to encourage them that the space program would continue. It was during the middle of Ronald Reagan's second presidential term that his speech occurred. Ronald Reagan, the 40th President of the United States of America, was going into his 6th year in office when he gave this speech. Reagan, a well-liked conservative president, was set to give a State of the Union address on that day. While the State of the Union was set to occur on this day, after the tragedy occurred that morning, Reagan changed the topic of the speech for a more fitting address. On the morning on January 28, 1986, the Space Shuttle Challenger was set to head into space for an exploration carrying 7 passengers, including Krista McAuliffe, a high school teacher who had, according to a History.com article, was the first ordinary American citizen to travel into space. On that morning of the disaster, though warned by engineers that potential mechanical failures could occur due to the cold temperatures, the space shuttle took off at 11:39 a.m. with millions watching on television. 73 seconds after takeoff, the shuttle disintegrated in mid-flight, killing all passengers. That evening, instead of doing the scheduled State of the Union address, Ronald Reagan spoke to the country to offer words of comfort as well as words of encouragement on how the United States would not quit the space program, and that just because this tragic event occurred, we would prevail and continue to explore and learn. The future doesn't belong to the faint-hearted. It belongs to the brave. How this message promoted the betterment of society was when Reagan, in his speech, spoke to the young children trying to confront them, comfort them. As many watched the footage that day, who one day would be leading our nation's space program and said, "I know it is hard to understand, but sometimes painful things like this happen. It's all part of the process of exploration and discovery. It's all part of taking a chance and expanding man's horizon." Reagan also said, "I've always had a great faith in and respect for our space program, and what happens today does nothing to diminish it," and that they would continue their quest into space. In his speech, Reagan promoted the betterment of society by providing them with words of comfort as they were mourning the loss of their friends, family, and some students and their teachers. In addition to the words of comfort, he let the country know that the quest for knowledge about the space program would continue despite this tragic event. And in conclusion, despite the tragic event that occurred, President Ronald Reagan was able to provide the necessary comfort and words of support, and the nation needed to help them deal with the shocking events from that day. It was in his speech where he talked about honoring those who were lost for their bravery, and that those at NASA would continue the mission that those whose lives were lost on, and said, "Nothing ends here. Our hopes and our journey continues.